There are many prompts that are going to appear as you do the installation, and well, you can just see them listed here. These are all the information that you're going to be asked for. But we'll cover those as we actually see the installation. So let's go ahead and do a sample installation. Let me go ahead and switch over to Windows Explorer. And what I've done is created myself a directory called PySource, and that's where I put the things that I downloaded off of our website in order to do the installation. The majority of customers nowadays are downloading all this off the web, but of course you may have a removable media like a CD or something that you've gotten to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and run this installation. And as that unzips, I should point out Pi is going to be put by default into the root directory. Under C, it'll be C:/Pi is the default directory. And there we go. And I'll go ahead and I'm ready to run the installation. And as most installation programs do, this is going to tell you what's already been installed and what is not yet installed. You can see a list of those things that will be installed, sample interfaces, just a variety of services, etc. So I'll go ahead and acknowledge. And like any good install program, it recommends we exit all window applications. That's a good idea. Now this is going to be we're being prompted at this point for the location of the license file. And I had located my particular license file in this directory right here, the PySource directory. So I'll just go out and specify that that's where the license file will be found during this particular installation in the PySource directory. And when you click on Next, you're going to be prompted for the registration information. And normally people don't put personal information, just information for your company. And the serial number is something, well, if you've gotten this shipped via the mails, you should have this as part of your packing list. If you don't know what your serial number is, then just put in a 0. This is also sometimes called the server number. If you don't know that, you can also contact your salesperson or technical support, and I'll get that number for you. I'll click Next, and this is the default directory, as I mentioned. This is going to go into actually this is looking at the D drive. I think I'm going to go ahead and put this on my C drive. And some people choose to put Pi on a different drive than their operating system, and sometimes that can help performance. But just go ahead and put it on whichever drive. It has to be a local drive, though, of course. Now, at this point, you get to choose whether you're going to install the default points or not. The default points are great for testing. Now, these are points such as, well, you may have seen these before. And you may have seen these in when we're running testing or webinars or training, Sinusoid, CDT158, CDM158. These are just kind of standard tags that we ship in each system. I just typed them here so that maybe you could recognize those from our demos. They're great little points to have just for troubleshooting purposes. So, for example, we'd like to leave them on there because if you've got a problem looking at archive data and you recognize that these tags are viewable but the other tags, the real-time data, are not viewable, that's a pretty good indication you probably have a problem with your interface and not a problem with your archives. So we suggest that you keep that clicked, or that checked. And then we also do suggest that you start up Pi when the operating system starts. That's by checking that will make these auto start services that will start up when the operating system boots. Now let me go back just for a second and remind you that you may find that there are extra screens that show up on your screen that you don't see right here. For example, during my server setup, it didn't ask me where to install the Pi SDK. That's because I already have Pi SDK-based applications installed on this computer. If you don't, you're going to be prompted to do so. And normally what we suggest people do is they put the Pi SDK into Program Files /PyPC. That's normally where the Pi SDK is going to be installed. So if you get that prompt, that's the proper way to answer that. Now, we had just answered this prompt, and now we move on to the next one, which is where we specify the path of the archives, the Pi archives. And for that, we suggest you just default to pi/dat. Now, if you do have a very large, hard drive, drive E that you provision just for the sake of putting archives on it, you could go ahead and switch over to that and put this into a different directory, call it pi/arc or something like that. That's fine too. It just defaults here, and that's a fine place to put it. But if you have other places to put it, that's not a problem. Just browse to it. Just make sure you don't go off to a network drive somewhere. That's certainly not recommended. Now, as to the default archive size, you'll notice it defaults to 128 megabytes. We don't really suggest anything hard and fast. In fact, if you look at our notes in the PowerPoint slides, what you'll see is that we suggest you go off to our website, and on our tech support website there is a section in the Knowledge Center called System Manager Resources Archive Sizing, and it's there that you'll read that we suggest you do between 10 kilobytes to 100 kilobytes per pi tag. Boy, that's a huge range. So really your mileage will vary tremendously, or I guess your performance will vary tremendously depending on the type of data compression you're doing. So we don't think it's a good idea to come up with hard and fast rules of thumb for archive sizing. Just suffice it to say the system is flexible enough that if you do have unusual needs, we can accommodate that with sizing. Now, the one rule is don't make these too big. That will slow them down slightly, but the rule is 10 to 100 kilobytes per 1 pi tag. Now, the Advanced button takes you to another screen where you can specify the location of the event queue. Now, we haven't discussed that yet. The event queue comes later in the class, but this snapshot event queue is a temporary holding place for data that, for whatever reason, is not making it into the archive. And technically, if you were to put this on a different disk drive, for example, if you've got a drive F, and I locate it there, and technically we could actually, if the archive process for some reason fails, we could continue to put data into that event queue file while the archive process has failed. So, for example, if your archives are on drive E and this is on a different drive, then if drive E failed, as long as pi itself is not located on drive E, that actually could work. So, I mean, typically people put this all on the same drive, but you do have the flexibility. Just to put this in perspective, we did not have this choice in previous versions of pi, and it didn't hurt people a great deal, but it is an extra flexibility we wanted to build into the system in case you did have the flexibility to put this event queue on a different drive. Now, the event queue sizing, there is a rule of thumb for that. We simply suggest you make this half the size of your archives. So again, this is the size of the file that we will flow to if for whatever reason we can't write to the archives. As far as the event queue page size goes, we don't have any hard and fast rules just to the size. Defaulting to 1024 kilobytes is fine. It basically has to do with the size of the annotations that can be written to the Pi archive. But unless you're doing something very unusual for annotations, the defaults should be just fine for you. I'll go ahead and acknowledge that and move on to the next prompt. And the last thing, of course, is to click Next and then start the installation. So what you're going to notice here during the installation is there's actually several installations that go on. We're going to install a variety of interfaces. We're also going to install that SDK that I mentioned, the Pi SDK. So they'll show up as we do the install. You'll notice a couple of different installs kick off. Now, while we're watching this, let me point out that the system is being installed in the c:/pi directory. And I should see that that's already been created. If I refresh this screen, there you can see the Pi directory. Within the Pi directory, you'll find the dat directory. That's where we're going to be putting the archives. We're going to initially create 3 archives. They're not there yet. And in addition, if you recall, the Pi client applications are going to go under Program Files into the subdirectory called PyPC. So Program Files /PyPC is where the client and also the SDK. Now, we were not prompted this time to choose a location of the SDK because it was already selected, or it was already installed on this machine. But if it had not been installed on this machine, then the default is to prompt you for a location, and the default location for that location is program files /pypc. And if I go back to the install, you'll notice that we're now in the middle of the SDK. You can see there's a separate install, the SDK install. You don't have to acknowledge any more prompts here. It's simply going to run through these different installs. Now the random interface, that's a random simulator, is going to be installed, and the other interfaces will be installed as well. Now this install was quickly sped up. Normally it takes quite a bit longer than this. Here's another type of interface, the PyPing interface. You'll notice we install 5 interfaces in total. We'll talk more about them later. But the PyPing interface, along with SNMP and PyPerformance Monitor, these are interfaces to help you monitor the health of your system. So those installs are going on right now. And as soon as we're done this, you'll get the acknowledgement that the installation was completed successfully. There we go. And as you can see now, if we go back into the py/dat directory, you can see that the archives, pyarch001, etc., have been installed properly. And now we're ready to do our post-installation configuration.